Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. One of the ongoing dreams of the gallery has been to be able to both have conversations about where we are and what the world is that is around us, and then sometimes to come together and dream. And so the meeting with the folks at the University of Nebraska in Omaha, probably at least 4 years ago, at a Samuel Bak exhibit and a subsequent meeting with the chancellor then of the university, Jeff Gold, that eventually turned into an agreement that the university was committed to having a Samuel Bak Museum and Learning Center on its campus, is really a dream. And it's now moving toward realization. Phase one, which was instituted by the next chancellor, Joanne Lee, enabled a phase one space to open, which is about 5,000 plus square feet. And almost 18 months that it's been there, it has created a series of exhibitions and programming that I think again elevated the dream, if you will, and the expectation as to what in fact the art of Samuel Bak can create and energize. And so today there's to be a conversation about where it is, in a sense where it's come from in such a short time, which is miraculous, and where I think each of us would like to see it come to, so that in an era which I would argue is finding museums less and less relevant, this museum, the Samuel Bak Museum and Learning Center, actually helps redefine what a museum can be as an active component in society. So as usual, I use quotes from Brother Thomas, who was an artist we worked with. And this seemed to me to be a wonderful way to begin, and then turn it over to Marc Skvirsky, who will act as a kind of moderator and questioner. Thomas wrote, "Only those who risk going too far can possibly learn how far one can go." And so we're on that journey. Marc.
All right, Bernie. So this is once again an honor for me. I've known Bernie and Sam for over 40 years, and they've sort of influenced my thinking about education, about the world of art, how it can sort of open up new possibilities. And the last time we sat here was at my retirement from Facing History 3 years ago. And the war in Ukraine had just broken out, and we were surrounded by paintings. Paintings of people who were dispossessed, people who were wandering, looking for what the next thing is. And it opened up a conversation. And today, we're here again, and we're surrounding by paintings, with a war in the Middle East, with more destruction in Ukraine, and with an election that's 2 weeks away that is probably going to be one of the most pivotal elections in this country's history. So the conversation today will be about Sam's work, what surrounds us, and also the possibility of what you're bringing and birthing into the University of Nebraska, but not just there, but really as an inspiration for people to think about these ideas across the globe. And I want to start with all of us who are here, so if you just take a minute to look around you at the paintings, and find an image, a feeling that you might have looking at the image, an idea, a concept, a question. Just look around, because you'll all be participating. So let's just put some of that into the room, some of those images. This is not long, it's one word, at the most one sentence. You don't have to give an explanation, but let's just fill the room. If you have several of them, just pop them up.
Art as a weapon?
Art is a weapon.
I'd say art as an intersection, thinking of that study of St. Sebastian, number of different fields that come together in one small study.
Okay.
Symbolism,
Symbolism.
destruction,
Destruction.
History.
History.
Mystery.
Mystery.
I would say hope.
I'd say color.
I guess I would go with defiance.
Defiance.
I would say love.
It's quite amazing when you hear how we're all integrating what we're looking at and being part of a community. Sam, this is, you painted this at a certain time of your life, past 90 years. You've also doing it when I know that you're concerned about what's happening in the world today as you sort of reflect on the past. Could you talk about this exhibit, how you painted this, why you painted this, what it means to you?
I mean, it is what it means to me. Polarized reactions that can be between different groups, but I have also known a lot of beautiful things that we are afraid to lose. And I think that in many of my paintings, there is the sense of the danger that is somehow imminent, but we want to keep on to something. And I think that when I painted this series of paintings, I felt that every human being has some tools with which he can express himself, he can communicate, he can, she can try to change somehow the reality. Now, for me, the creation of something different, of something that didn't exist before, is in the paint, which is enclosed in the tube of paint, is the brush that transports it to the canvas. But of course, the whole thing is, what I'm speaking of is technical, because then comes a certain vision of things. And what do I express? I try to express what is very common, that I feel that is very common between me and all the other humans. I mean, we want to have stability, but on what does our stability hold? I mean, look at this painting there. You have the big tube. It gives a sense of stability because it's horizontal. There is a house on it, but the whole thing holds precariously on a brush that is maybe a certain expression of an illusion that we have. And when you spoke of the time in which we live, in which we are in front of this election, a day that is really so scary, this anguish, this existential anguish, is something that was nourishing all my paintings, knowing very well that you cannot be totally hopeless if you don't have some hope. So there is a desire to believe that something will come out from it. But there is also in my life, there have been many moments in which I feel that, in which I felt that I have accomplished something, and many moments in which I felt very sad because I realized that I lived in realities that could not be changed. I could only change them for myself. I felt very small when I decided that, for instance, that the country in which I lived and which I loved, like Israel, is going to the dogs. And in 1980, I said, well, a country where I am not sure that if I go out from my home without wearing a yarmulke, police won't come to arrest me, I cannot live here. And I decided to live. But what does it mean to leave Israel? I was brought up by my mother with this idea, with the second version of Zionism, because the first version of Zionism was not an independent state, was only a state within something. But since 42, 43, Zionism became a real state. A real state. It was Ben-Gurion's change in the definition of Zionism. And I was brought up with that, so suddenly this, to leave the home that was so essential for our existence, and a sentence that I can still hear when I speak with my cousins in Israel, and they say, but after all, like every people, we also deserve a home. Now, where do we start from this point? How do we go back? How can we correct mistakes that were done in the past, but not by us, even by others, and so on? So it's extremely complex, all this life that I have and all these things that I carry in me. And I must say that, every painting that you have here carries something of that, of a hope that emerges, like in this painting here. But the colors that we paint, the hope, they're also running out. They are coming out, and it is the same. The orange in the fire that comes out from almost like a volcano, and the orange on the rainbow of the symbol of a hope and promise that nothing bad will happen again. So I'm sorry I spoke maybe too much. No. But what I want to say is that all this kind of mental coming apart of so many people who become conscious of the world in which we live, and the world that asks from us to accept living with different kinds of truth, living with problems that cannot be solved. All this is not simple, but it is a matter of acceptance. And I think that after Darwin, who tried to explain how the humans have developed into what they have developed by the best surviving, finally they changed the idea of the most adaptable. So I kind of feel myself that I'm an adaptable human being, that I accept all the things that have happened in my life. I try to do whatever I can. I think that I am there to prevent maybe as much as I can through some warnings that I do with my paintings. People doing things, making choices out of sheer ignorance. So I hope that with the help of the people that will introduce my paintings, that will make, because here it is, I'm just doing one step in a certain direction, but I need more people to do more steps in the same direction so that my step will have a certain sense. What I very much need is people like Alexandra, like Hillary, like Bernie, of course, who was the major matchmaker of this whole thing, the creator of this whole thing, is that suddenly my paintings became an extraordinary material that helps people to say, look well. Things are not always the way they appear to you. Something is behind them. They have a past. These rainbows are maybe put together from bits and pieces of hopes that once existed, and yet they are there because they are so important to us. So, I mean, you can go on. Every painting has some bits and pieces of me, and they speak about that, about this sense of perpetual not knowing what is going to be tomorrow, and at the same time, getting up in the morning, getting up from my bed, seeing that I'm not dead there in that bed, that I'm there with a wonderful day that awaits me, you know, with my wife who is going to scream at me from this or that. I put too much sugar or too little sugar in her coffee, I don't know what. But I mean, all these wonderful things of daily life. So all these are gifts. All these are gifts. So I try also this sense of joy and this sense of the gift of life to transmit in the colors that I use for my paintings. My paintings are very colorful. They are kind of almost inspired by illustrations for children of the 19th century. Because what I want is people to be attracted and to get in, and once they're in, then they will feel that they're in a dangerous zone. But you cannot really learn anything unless you dare to explore a dangerous zone. Comfort alone is not enough. I'm sorry I took up a lot of the time, so please go on and interview
this is, you know, it's interesting. You talked about this at the beginning, and I thought a lot about sort of the concept of tools of the trade.
Yeah.
Because what Bernie does here is one of the tools of dissemination, of learning, of using your paintings to open up conversations. And what Hillary and Alex are doing in Nebraska is extraordinary.
Yeah.
So I want to move there. I want to move to you, Hillary, about sort of what you're creating. I know you're creating environment. Bernie mentioned it in the very beginning, you know, about the beginnings of this. But where are you in this process? How do you, I'm going to put on several questions and you can sort of answer them the way you want. But I'm curious for you to talk about Nebraska. It's not Boston, it's not Chicago, it's Nebraska. And it has, you know, all the political issues, you know, that the country is sort of dealing with right now. How do you see this museum, as Sam said, it's sort of exploring different parts of the truth in an area there's sometimes people want to go deep and other times they don't. How do you think about this museum?
Yes. So we're in Nebraska, and you talked about politics, election. We're traditionally we are a red state, but UNO is right in the heart of Omaha, Nebraska, the largest urban city in the state, and also we're called a blue dot. So if you Google any news source right now, it's all over. In fact, every day I keep seeing the blue dot. In fact, I think there's a demonstration of a blue dot right outside my house happening right now at one of our largest parks. So a very open, liberal, amazing community is where the university sits, first of all. So it makes it great, right, to be in a space like that. And then I just want to say our leadership at the university with Dr. Gold as the president and Dr. Lee as our chancellor really allows us to explore as much as we want and really push the boundaries. So Chancellor Lee really thinks about this museum and learning center being a space that's going to push and going to ask the question. She's like, we're not going to shy away from that. We are not going to shy away and be told we can't do that in a space. So that first of all, I think that sets the boundaries really great for me and my staff. I think we both feel that way, hopefully. Alex does. So it's amazing. So we're in a really great environment for us to grow and learn. In our first 18 months of operation, of course, we had nearly 11, we surely have gone over 11,000 by now. I haven't really looked at the numbers lately, I should, but nearly 11,000 people walking through our doors. And that's really broken up with 50% general public. So we're first served the general public. That's really a community-based museum where people are coming in who aren't necessarily college students and aren't K-12 students, and they're coming in and they're experiencing the space just like I think Sam wants and we want. We want people to come in and enjoy his art and ask questions and have dialogue. And then from there, we have about 20% where we serve university students, faculty, and staff. That looks really different every day because Alex, our curator, is amazing with all of that constituency. She customizes every experience with them, which takes a lot of time to really hone into whatever course or whatever study they're coming from. And then 30% of our first year of population were K-12, which we're very excited, right? Those are our growing, budding college students, our growing, budding population. And I always like to say I was very cocky when we, Marc knows this, when we branched into K-12 work. I was like, oh, no one will come, it'll be fine. Alex and I will handle field trips for 1 or 2. And then we had 100 kids come in, like 30 field trips. It was ridiculous, the number of field trips the first year. And we had no director of education. We have since remedied that and hired a director of education. But for us, that to me is the most meaningful work. And yesterday, you weren't here, Marc, but there were a group of about 8 mass art, right, from mass art students who, these young people walked in the elevator with me. They were very excited and they were talking about a field trip. And they had come to the gallery here on a field trip like 12 years ago, am I right? No, 8 years ago. And they were so excited to come back. And then they were even more excited that they knew Sam was here. And it was so beautiful for me yesterday to see that because students walk into the museum every day and to watch them just interact with his art. They want to interact with him. I think Sam would be upset if we Zoomed him every day for 5 or 6 times a day, but they want to interact with him. So we're constantly trying to find a way to make sure they can connect with him even though he's not in the space.
So I hope you don't mind, but I want to, how about you? I mean, you had a very successful career.
Well, I hope it's still going, yes.
You had a very successful, what you were doing with museum, and you took a big leap. Wow.
Yeah.
What is it about building this is sort of your calling?
Well, for me, Sam's art is this perfect intersection of art and human justice and social justice, human rights. And I've always worked in human rights my entire life, and obviously I have a personal passion for it, but it was able to come together in my professional career, which was amazing. And then for me, being in a space where we're creating a new museum, we set the rules. Traditionally art museums are very siloed, like any large institution. And I this museum will not be siloed like that. It has to be an intersection of everyone playing together and learning together and across campus for us to really make the impact we want to be. So for me, it was a little bit of a gamble. I was very nervous. I don't know if Sam and Bernie remember my first call with them. I was very nervous. I was very, very, very nervous. I talked about a pear. I think that was all I talked about. But for me, I mean, just as the process went through and then the reality of getting the job and then coming here to see Sam, like day 2, I came to meet everyone, all 3 of you. I remember, Marc, you asked me, so what's your plan? And I was like, well, I've been on the job for 24 hours, so I have no plan yet. I have to kind of get my hands around it. But for me, that was so exciting. And then being able to hire amazing staff. I have amazing staff. And Alex is amazing. I never in my wildest dreams would have thought she would have applied for the job. I mean, I really thought I was going for just a different level assistant manager and got a chief curator. So that's what makes it so wonderful is that I have this partnership with someone who can create. I probably temper you more than you temper me. A little more than I temper the real side.
So Alex, you came on the job. Why? Why this work?
So what I really admired about Sam's work was how, and I think Hillary put it best, art is a preface for a conversation. And with Sam's work, I felt that conversation was really alive. It's a work that represents his experience, but also showcases a history of the 20th and 21st century. It is a reaction to one's contemporary moment, and it demands the viewer's participation. And so that's really exciting. I've worked in museums, I've worked with contemporary artists, and sometimes that relationship between the art and the viewer felt stale because it can be very prescribed. There is a way, a tradition of looking at paintings. And at first glance, Sam is an incredibly traditional artist. He's someone who is very cognizant of the history of art, but he's someone who doesn't allow you to have a single relationship with it. There's this curiosity behind the image that forces you to think. And as you said, they're painted in bright colors, they're beautiful, and they attract. And then there's a space of instability that takes place that forces you to think beyond the symbol, beyond the surface. And also, I saw when you see things digitally, everything's flattened, right? And then you see Sam's work in person, and you realize how exciting the brushwork is. So, as an art historian, of course, the socio-political side of the painting was fascinating and something to dive into. But just the technique that's there, the beauty of the painted surface, is also just purely exciting for someone who loves painting. So, it seemed like this wonderful opportunity to return to the museum from the classroom, to engage in cross disciplines. Like my background's in political science, history of art, and art history. So suddenly I was going to have the opportunity to host conversations that I'd been wanting to have within the museum, but the museum space can be monolithic. The conversation can be purely art historical. It is a space in which people can disengage a lot. The average viewer looks at a painting for 4 seconds and walks on. You can't do that with one of Sam's paintings. The conversation is so intense, you get caught up. And so the ability to really make, as Hillary said, that art as a preface, and to keep this art alive. When I see 18, 20-year-olds interacting with this, they come at it with their own perspective, and they bring their own histories to it. They bring their own experience. And there's an intimate relationship that develops that is really exciting to witness. At a time when people are just scrolling through social media, seeing 10,000 images a day, they have a moment where they're arrested and forced to confront the reality of their contemporary moment.
So we talked, thank you. We talked early, 2 weeks ago about this, and there's also a personal connection to why you do this work.
So I grew up in France, and I grew up in this strange time when there were a lot of debates taking place between Holocaust survivors, those who wanted to hold space for the memory of Jewish people who were in France, not forcibly French citizens, but people who were fleeing Germany, who were deported. And the role of the French government within that deportation, within the theft of Jewish property. And there was a whole section of the government that was in denial of that didn't want it to be part of the official history. We were surrounded by people who were still alive, who had participated in the Vichy government, that were collaborators. And I had these wonderful teachers who pushed us to think about these histories and how complicated they were. There was this horrendous, it was a velodrome, a site for, I don't know the word in English, velodrome, is it the same one? cyclotron, where it was a sports arena, and they took Jewish people and locked them in there, and didn't give them food or water. They didn't know where they were going, and French policemen arrested them and placed them there for days until they were deported by train or taken to Drancy, an internment camp. And people committed. It has an absolutely horrific history, and the French government wouldn't acknowledge that the Veldiv had taken place when I was a child. We knew it had taken place. We were having conversations about it, and it's not until 2002 that the French government officially recognized France's role in that. And so, growing up with that history, I felt that this work would continue as Sam takes on this role of bearing witness, really very openly from the 60s on, that this work would continue that conversation, would not just speak to the Holocaust, but also these ongoing cycles of violence that we're confronted with. We see genocide after genocide, and the Holocaust is not unique in human history. Humans have always been bent on destroying an entire population, but it is the one that stands as sort of like the worst of humanity. And so Sam's incredible courage in dedicating his career to the commemoration is something that really inspired me, because it was the first time that I really saw through this figurative painting with symbols, this complexity, this willingness to address the human condition.
Thank you.
It's interesting what you said, because I don't know, sometimes I have a feeling that my life is like a 19th century old novel, you know, where all kinds of incredible things happen. But what you were speaking of the Vichy government. When I came to Paris in '56, I had little money, and I had to live somewhere, have a place to sleep and maybe even paint. I found a room in a house of a Jewish widow from Vilna. She survived. She lost her children. She lost her husband. She married a man who lost his children and his wife. And quite late in life, she became pregnant. She became pregnant, and a short time after she gave birth to her little daughter, her husband died. I don't remember exactly of what, something maybe like polio or one of those very bad viral diseases. When I came to rent a little room in her flat, there was this little girl. She was 7 then, and she grew up without a father. She kind of fell in love with me. I was 23, I think, and she was very sweet, and I helped her making drawings in her copybook for her first year of school and so on. Then I moved on to live somewhere else. When here, my friend, he's a historian, Solon Beinfeld, told me, well, you know, there is a lecture about the Vichy government in Cambridge. I will go there, and there is this historian. She wrote a book about the Vichy government and the Jews and so on. And then we discovered this was this little girl, Renée Poznansky, who wrote the book on the Jews and the Vichy government, and it's considered one of the most important. And we rekindled our friendship. We became very good friends, and she came here to stay especially a couple of days with us, with Jose and me. And these strange connections of what you were speaking before, and suddenly the idea that this little girl, when she became more adult and tried to focus on doing something meaningful in her life, she had to bring up the story of the Jews, of fascism, she brought it up certainly more in the milieu of what she knew, France, because she grew up in France and so on. But also because this was, while for instance Germany recognized relatively early the terrible responsibility that Germany has, in France, the acknowledgement of what the French did to the Jewish population, that once the Germans entered Paris, the police, the French police, gave them immediately the list of all the apartments where Jews live. And when there was society that decided to put on all the apartments where Jews lived and were taken then to be killed in the killing fields, little signs that say, here lived family so and so. Yes, the French said, but this can only be put on the wall that corresponds to the apartment. So which, if it is, for instance, a third floor or a fourth floor, it will be put up there. So nobody saw it. I mean, Paris has several thousands of these things that no one can see because they are, today certainly, with so I had this friend from Israel. The Rekanati family paid for it to have them make photographs of all these things, and there is this book called Murmure, which means in French, it's beautiful, it means walls and murmur. So it's just telling the story of from where, in the time of the Vichy government, people were taken to their death. So all these things somehow connect strangely. I mean, when you read it in a novel, you say, invented.
So, Alex, I'm going to stay with you for a minute because you're surrounded by these paintings. You're surrounded by 500 pieces of art that you need at this point to curate. And so you're constantly thinking about themes and ideas and questions that we sort of started out with. Is there a painting here, and I think there is because we talked about a couple, that you want to have Sam reflect on?
Well, the problem is here that Sam already spoke about the two paintings that I was going to start with. So I think I would like Sam to focus on this one a little bit more. Because we had a fabulous conversation. I mean, I say fabulous, but we had this very intense conversation when we were in his studio last time about this particular piece, which for me really captures this contemporary moment in the landscape of events that are developing around Holocaust commemoration. So, Sam, when we were seeing the loss of the palette and the emergence from this tomb-like of a crematorium chamber, I just would be interested in your thoughts about how the resurgence of the right wing in Europe, how theories of double genocide, of Holocaust distortion, of historical distortion, have maybe impacted this body of work.
Yeah, when I painted that painting, I think what was in my mind is that when we are confronted by the extremes of human cruelty, what people can do to each other, we say, well, there are no words. There are no words. How can you describe? How can you write about it? I mean, there are famous saying of who was it? Yeah.
Words are insufficient.
Yeah, but that after the Holocaust you cannot write
Adorno.
poetry. Yeah, and so. But still, and a lot was written, and a lot was done, and people try to convey that, and there are some who do it better, some who do it less. I mean, Larry Langer wrote a book about the uses and abuses of the Holocaust and so on, because there is also a lot of sentimentalization of that, because people think, well, it's so difficult to speak about the horrors that we must use some sweetener. So this idea of, I mean, what is my language? My language is shaped by the paint that I mix on my palette. But you cannot mix anything in a palette like that because it's a hole into which people can be thrown. The little opening in the palette through which you put your finger in order to hold it gives out some smoke. Is the opening of a chimney. And we suspect then that it might be a chimney of a crematorium because on the left side of the palette, on the wall, is also a big Star of David, a yellow star, which was the identity which I had to carry on my coat. And then the paints are kind of hopeless. Even the brush despaired, died on top of the brush. And there is a fire. And there is a smoke, and there is a fire that goes on, and the fire is always a symbol of eternal memory. You know, the Arc de Triomphe has a fire that is always there, and the unknown soldier, I mean, the famous thing. So this is not like this is about many unknown soldiers.
Hillary, I'd like to sort of take it from here, where we are, and the paintings that you see, and know that 30 years from now there's going to be an extraordinary museum. And right now I know you're working on, raising money, and you're, working with Alex and the education director to make sure every minute is used well in terms of opening up these conversations so you can refine the art of facilitation, the art of bringing people together. In that moment that you can breathe, do you dream, can you tell me your dream in 10 years from now, what this museum might be able to do?
Yes, and even beyond fundraising and trying to figure out what we're doing. Right now, the university leadership is trying to decide who partners in that building. So the original concept was a space within an existing building, and while nice and a great concept, a very small space. And so I love this vision of a new building. It allows for a lot broader of a space for the museum and learning center than what was originally prescribed. And I have a long list from my chief curator, my director of education, of how much square footage is needed from both of them, including. But I think for me, it's most important that we really have, obviously, welcoming open space that reflects, I think Sam reflects what he's about. It reflects hope. I said love because I would have said hope. I would have totally said hope, what Bernie said, because that's what I think about when I look at Sam's paintings every day, no matter how hard the conversation is. I always come back to hope. I don't know if Alex does, but I do. I definitely do, because it's how we do our work. So for me, opening, and I think about a space that's just lively with that mix of community that we're seeing right now, but has blossomed even more, and hopefully feeding from a regional and a national and even international community to come be a part of it, really putting Omaha really out there for what we're doing. So I could get into more specifics. Yeah. Well, I want this and this, but for me, I want a space that people don't realize this. We're segmented. So we have this beautiful museum space that Alex offices in, but I office on campus because the space is too small for me to office next to Alex or our director of education. So I want a space where every day I don't have to email you and I can just walk to your office, just because you want that with your staff. I want all of our staff and growing with that.
So Alex, as the curator, what's your dream in 10 years? What will it look like when we go into?
For me, the dream is to keep the messaging of this painting alive by placing it in conversation not just with visitors, but also contemporary artists. so that the themes that we see in Sam's work, we don't see them as limited to a particular historical moment, but we see them transcending one person's lifetime to really speak to that history of humanity, to keep those conversations around difficult topics, that keep us looking at the gray zones, that keep complicating our worlds. And Sam did this wonderful video for us. It was an introductory video where he says that art that's not being looked at is dead. And I think that's something that's really important for us to constantly hold forth, is we need the space to be forever one of interaction and conversation. And so what Sam does to me is extraordinary, because it is something that I can always bring to the contemporary moment. So we've had shows about forced migration that look to what's taking place in 2024. The current show is really about human rights, to force people to have a moment of confrontation with why can't we apply this act of tikkun ultimately that humanity tried to lead with in 1948. Why are we so distant from those principles today? And what guiding principles should inform our community of the future? How do we build integrated communities that are welcoming to all, and that allow for all to be represented and their histories to be spoken of?
And I do think, I was just going to add that we really think about the idea of traveling exhibitions from the collection. We think about that now, we're talking about that now, so how we can get Sam's work not just even across Nebraska and the Midwest, but all over. We have our first loan happening, which is really exciting, with another university, but not a full exhibition. So I think about what Alex is doing and how that can be transformed and changed into full-fledged out there, because that's so important too, not just, local.
Yeah, and it's important because Sam has 3 museums, so to have conversations just between those museums is going to involve a touring exhibition, and to have conversations that take place across the United States, across disciplines, is going to involve touring the collection as much as possible. So building this, Sam's work is incredibly nimble in many ways, and it's a joy for a curator, because the conversations you can pull from every exhibition. I try to have 1 or 2 works from the previous exhibition, so that people realize, oh, I've seen that painting before, but in this context, it's speaking to this other topic that I didn't even consider last time I looked at it. And so the ability to tour Sam's work and to really target a conversation that is happening at a local, national, and international level is fantastic. So we want to share this gift far beyond the museums of the wall. I'm not interested in a museum that's closed off, that is one location. It has to be a museum that travels digitally with paintings and across generations.
Wow. So Bernie and Sam, you're hearing this. This is something that you've thought about, you've dreamed about, the legacy of your work. Where does it go? How does it speak to people? As you sit in this conversation, what are you feeling? What are you thinking?
Well, I certainly have felt, and we've now seen it post-COVID, that museums are struggling to simply justify their existence as a repository. Secondly, most of them are structured chronologically, 16th century this, 17th century that. And what you've done in 18 months is really to create a whole new approach. Alain de Botton did this in his book. That said, why don't we do museums with themes? Love, hate, hope. And in a sense, that's all embedded in these paintings, but you've already understood that by dealing with either migration, displacement. You've allowed people to come into your space and feel that they can relate to it as if it is part of their world. I go back to 1968 when we did the first show of Sam's work, and the 2 reviews of the show were the Harvard Crimson and the MIT newspaper, saying these are the most relevant contemporary paintings we have ever seen. And that's true today too, because they address the human condition and the potential and the negative in that experience. So it's an amazing standard for other museums to actually think about, one, if they're going to survive, and if they are going to survive, to use this approach to the collection that they have, where it's already gifted in the sense that what Sam has been concerned with for the last some 80 years is already available to us. And you've done an amazing job in just a short time in understanding that and then using it pedagogically and emotionally and humanly so that the people who have encountered what Sam has done are already elevated in their experience as human beings.
I just want to touch upon something that is actually truly marvelous about this gift. Most gifts are given with rules. You can't do this. You have to say this. You can't hang this painting next to that painting. These paintings can never travel. Sam gave us a gift that's extraordinarily generous in comparison to how other people have gifted art, because he gave it to us with no demands as to what should happen with the art. And I don't know, like for those who are not familiar with museums, I don't think people realize how constrained curators can be and what they can talk about because of the nature of a gift. I worked in a museum, and we joked a little bit about it, but we always called it the invisible wires. We couldn't take certain works off of the wall. This work had to be constantly shown next to that work. This work couldn't travel. So anytime you wanted to curate something, you had to remember what the wire was, and you had to go back, and the registrar reminded you of how that was given to you and what you could or could not do. What Sam did is truly reflective of his spirit of generosity and his desire for his paintings to engender conversations by not limiting what we could do. So I just want to say thank you for that, because I don't think anyone realizes how precious a gift that is.
Yes, but let me just say from my point of view, I know what a painting is. It's a stretcher, it's a canvas on the stretcher, and is some colors covering the surface. And then it creates the possibility of an illusion of something, a vision that you have. But all that, if you do not look at it, stops existing, doesn't exist. I mean, I have hundreds of paintings in my storage, and they don't exist because no one looks at them. So for me to have this incredible gift, this incredible privilege to give over my painting to people who inject into them life, because the paintings become alive only when people look at them. And people look at them because they are helped actually to enter it. I mean, what you are doing, I remember I had a friend, my closest friend in Israel. He became a doctor and then was in the Israeli army, and he became a doctor of paratroopers. And then he was killed in one of the actions. But from my class, there were about 6 that died in the army. And he said, well, there's a reality. But he told me something interesting. He said, when I had to jump the first time, I was a little afraid. And then I realized that our instructor was giving every one of the first jumpers a push. And then we jumped and we realized. And I think that what you are doing is you give really a push to the people to look at the painting, to jump into the space and start to use it in order to reflect on themselves, in order to reflect on their own world. Of course, related to happenings in the world. I mean, you know, I'm very often, I was defined a Holocaust painter. What is a Holocaust painter? I don't know. But it is true that somehow in my own experience, the trauma of my life, the Holocaust is there. The Holocaust, today, a word that is even poorly used or not rightly used, because the Holocaust was a unique thing in the history of the human existence. I mean, the theory was to destroy everyone of a certain people. Everyone was a subject for destruction. Even you, Bernie, who lived here in the States, you were, in given conditions, also, and this has never existed before. So I must say today, when people who are not well informed, when they compare what goes on in, and I'm very far from defending the Israeli government, because I think it's a disaster in the history of the Jews. But what is happening there when Israel tries to express its self-defense and has to deal with people who are human shields of another system and so on. And the word Holocaust is used and in a wrong way, not in the fullness of what it expresses. And it expresses really the maximum of the human potential to do evil. And so I really hope that also by the education that my paintings can somehow contribute is somehow keep the right words in the right places, because a good conversation can only happen when people use a language that is well defined. So, and this is of course also what I very much hope. I mean, you very kindly refrained from asking me what am I imagining myself in 10 years from now. I could. I mean, I don't think I would like to. Maybe next year I'll become old, but at an age of 100, you are certainly old. What did I want to say? I lost now the thread of my thought, which is nice, you see, which is a senior moment. I really, in 10 years from now, hope that these wonderful people will continue giving life to my paintings. It is pretending somehow eternity is too much, because in art we know the things go up and down, and the historians make certain things important and then the things become. But all I hope is that humanity does not face anymore the terrible evil to which it was exposed, the evil of what is defined by the Holocaust. So learning history in the context of really what is happening now, how it means, what it means to us now, where we can go from here, there, all this only can happen with people like these two ladies who are here and the ones that work with them and so on. Because once the artist is gone, he's not there. But what a joy, what a gift to be able to live all this after me. I mean, sometimes when I'm a little like this sad or mainly I've spoken with my cousins in Beersheba, so you can imagine how I feel. I go up to my screen, I put on my catalogue raisonné, and I look at all the things that I have done. Quickly. I say, my goodness, all this junk will remain after me? Well, here we go.
So, the fine art of teaching with this, I spent a lot of my career doing that, having students really look and describe and then try to interpret. But I always, there's a fine line between having them do it just on their own and then helping them see things that maybe they don't see, and that's the art of education. And Bernie has been my teacher. Every time I go in here, he he helped open up my mind because I don't read Hebrew and I don't read this or that. I haven't read the Bible, whatever it is. So, Alex, before we end, I'd like you as a curator to take a painting in here and deconstruct it, and how you look at it, how you approach it, what questions do you ask? What do you...
Well, okay, so there, as I said, Sam's paintings offer several conversations. But one thing that marked me in our first conversation together is that you said that my paintings are not rebuses to be solved. They're not, I don't want you to look at them and deconstruct every element within them. So it's a challenge in itself, because people will walk up to me and say, what does that little thing mean? What does that little thing? What does that mean? And they want that certainty. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, you want that certainty because you've been placed in a space of uncertainty. You're trying to grasp on something you know. So for me, I think I would pick We Are Still Here.
Which one is that?
It's the one with these paintings that are upright, with the yellow flags above them and wrapped around them. They're at the edge of an ocean. And this is really what made me think of the word defiance, is that the paintbrushes are still there. Yes. And they refuse.
God, how are we going to do this?
Are
we doing this
and there's this wonderful uprightness by them that seem to be defying a specific definition and also refusing to disappear. And there's this everlasting presence here. So I really love this piece in terms of several conversations. One about the conversation of Sam refusing to put the paintbrushes down, but also a conversation by those who refuse to disappear when faced with destruction. Those who stand up and resist, those who bear witness after the fact. And despite this wind that's coming and agitating these yellow cloths and almost blinding them by covering the upper parts of the brushes, there's a refusal there that is just wonderful. And there's the blue sky in the background. And something that I've always been marked with Sam's work is this appearance of the sky in the different plays. In comparison to what's happening in the foreground, you have this incredibly peaceful sky. And so there's a promise there. In Sam's work, there always seems to be an act of transposition. If you can make it past the horizon line, if you can make it to the distant land, if you can make it to that island beyond those paintbrushes, you can find that place of safety and peace. And a place that could be illustrated by that skewered paint tube that is flying through the sky of this act of grounding. Maybe this is the place you can be at. Maybe this is the place where you won't be tormented by history, but where you can find your grounding. And so, you can take it from there and grow that conversation and force people to look closer and to question how they would act in that moment, because you are asking people that question. What is it that you're going to do when confronted to Sam's art? What are the questions that you have, and what actions can you take at your local level? When we look at global conflicts, it's overwhelming, but you can change the world by just reaching out. And I feel like Sam's work is that reach out, the desire to ask someone a question, hold a conversation, but also making that deliberate choice to potentially save another person's life.
Bernie passed me something in the middle of the conversation. Is this by Brother Thomas?
Oh, sure.
Brother Thomas says, perhaps we are made to look back just for the experience of being amazed as much by what we have done as by what we can still do. Mm-hmm. So, what everyone is doing, Bernie, with this art in this gallery and beyond, in your museum, and keep painting and keep teaching. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.